Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into something a little muddier, specifically, the soggy, sun-drenched rice fields of the Han Dynasty. You're standing barefoot at the edge of a steaming, mist-wrapped floodplain, thick with the smell of wet earth and fermenting straw. The sky hangs low, humid and heavy, while dragonflies skim the surface of the waterlogged paddies around you. You shift your weight, and your foot sinks with a slow slurp into the mud. And, by the way, watch out for the leeches. Yeah. Welcome to ancient rice farming. You're going to sweat, you're going to itch, and yes, you'll spend most of the day either knee-deep in water or trying not to trip over some farmer's runaway duck. You'll haul buckets, swat mosquitoes, and maybe even learn why a good mud brick wall is more valuable than a cousin who owes you 2 goats. But this is survival. Because in the southern reaches of the Han Empire, this is how life gets grown, one muddy step at a time. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push past a tangle of rushes and step into the floodplain. The Han Empire is at its peak. Bureaucrats are filing tax quotas with calligraphy pens, Confucian scholars are arguing over filial piety, and you? You're a humble farmer trying to keep your rice alive long enough to eat some of it. The land here is generous, but also moody, prone to flooding, drought, and the occasional "hey, who moved the river?" kind of disaster. But the river valleys and flatlands of the Yangtze and Huai are prized for one reason: they can grow a whole lot of rice. Your family's been here for generations. Maybe longer. They say your great-grandfather dug out these fields with nothing but a sharpened stick and sheer spite. The water table's high, the rainfall's wild, and every dry season you pray it stays that way. You start your mornings before the sun shows up, often waking to the distant honking of geese or the very close honking of your grandfather's nose as he snores in the next room. Your house is a squat, mud-plastered structure with thatched roofing and squeaky wooden beams. It leans slightly to the east, not out of design, just bad luck, and the door creaks like it's afraid of being opened. Outside, the fields stretch in a patchwork of watery rectangles, hemmed in by narrow ridges of packed earth that work as footpaths and miniature levees. Most of your life revolves around those rectangles. You walk them like a maze, barefoot, calculating where the silt is thickest or where weeds might choke out the next harvest. Every few meters, you can see the handiwork of your ancestors. Small dikes, carved spillways, handmade sluice gates patched with bundled reeds and optimism. No GPS. No blueprint. Just memory and mud. As you walk, a frog leaps across your path. Another one plops into the water with a perfect splush. The paddies are alive, teeming with bugs, snails, frogs, and the occasional eel that somehow slithered in from the irrigation canal. And speaking of canals, your village's water system is a delicate balance of hand-dug channels and bamboo pipe ingenuity. Keep them flowing right, and everyone eats. Let one clog, and, well, you learn just how many ways your neighbors can call you incompetent without ever raising their voices. The mainstream fact. Southern China's floodplains were the breadbasket, or rice bowl, really, of the Han Empire. The state invested heavily in encouraging rice agriculture here, not just for feeding cities, but for tax revenue. In fact, they often relocated people southward with land incentives, just to get more rice in the empire's belly. Rice cultivation in this region wasn't some fringe practice, it was an imperial priority. But out here, it's not politics. It's personal. You remember the exact year your family lost half the crop to a flood that arrived in the middle of harvest season. You also remember your uncle's terrible attempt at building a flood barrier using only his prized ox yoke and 3 buckets. He insists it worked. Everyone else knows it didn't. You stop for a moment, kneeling beside a water-filled furrow. A line of tiny green seedlings tremble under the breeze. They're just days old, and already they're being stalked by insects who think of your field as an open buffet. You reach for your duck whistle, yes, that's a thing, and blow a short, practiced note. From behind a bamboo fence, a waddling team of ducks makes their slow, quacking advance. They've done this before. Bugs today, dinner tomorrow. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. To really understand how you got here, squatting beside a muddy ditch in a tunic that smells like fermented straw, you need to rewind a few hundred years. Before the Han Dynasty, before the floodplains were checkered with human effort, this land was just wild marsh and wandering rivers. People still argue over exactly when rice farming got serious in this region. Was it 4,000 years ago? Earlier? Later? Historians still debate whether the spread of wet field cultivation was driven by climate shifts, population pressure, or just someone getting very clever with a drainage ditch. What is clear is that by the time of the Han, this land had been reshaped, terraformed by hand, and hope into something just barely predictable. You look out over the water. It shimmers gold in the morning light, but you're not fooled. This place is no paradise. It's a truce between you and the environment, one you renegotiate every single planting season. You pass your neighbor, an old woman named Liang, who's dragging a reed mat through her field like it owes her money. She grins at you, toothless but fierce. "Water's low today," she mutters. "Hope you remembered the moon cycle this time." You didn't. You never do. But you nod like you did, because everyone pretends they've got this figured out. Meanwhile, you're still losing sleep over whether you seeded too shallow last week. As you keep walking, you remember the first time your father let you guide the buffalo. You were maybe 10, and the buffalo was having a midlife crisis. It veered left, ignored your tugging, and then dunked itself dramatically in the irrigation canal like it had just given up on agriculture entirely. You cried. Your dad laughed. The buffalo got a day off. You step over a snake, not dangerous, just annoyed, and duck under a crooked wooden sign that marks the start of your family's lot. There's no paper deed. Just hand-carved stakes, village gossip, and enough muscle memory to know where not to plant. Land ownership is flexible out here. Technically, the state can reclaim your fields anytime. But realistically, it's the village elders who decide whose paddy ends where, and sometimes the only thing standing between you and a boundary dispute is a shared jar of rice wine. That brings you to one more little headache, the taxman. He doesn't live in your village, but you feel him here. Every row you plant, every seed you toss, every duck you scold, it's all with the awareness that come harvest time, a percentage won't be yours. You'll stack your dried rice in bundles, weigh them out with a nervous smile, and hope the collector's in a good mood this year. They say in the capital, rice is used to brew sweet wine and serve nobles. Here, it's survival. That's why it stings when they take the best bundles first. But for now, there's still work to do. You slosh back through your plot, double-checking the small, earthen ridges that hold the water in place. A crack here, a collapsed corner there, and boom, your neighbor's water becomes your problem. It's a delicate system, and every family is one lazy cousin away from flooding someone else's seedlings. You pause again, looking out over the vast, shimmering plain. Each patch is a story, a struggle, a sweaty poem written in mud. And tomorrow, you'll wake up, stretch your aching legs, and write it again. So let's fast forward a few hours. The sun is hanging low now, smudging the sky with orange, and your back is a tapestry of aches. You've been bent over so long your shadow looks permanently hunched. A thin layer of dried mud crusts your calves, and the smell of the paddies, earthy, green, a little sour, is clinging to your skin like a second tunic. You're standing at the edge of a field that stretches out in watery mirrors, each reflecting a slightly different sky. A water bird lifts off nearby with a startled shriek, its wings dragging ripples across the surface. And you're still not done for the day. But this isn't just grunt work. It's engineering, strategy, a muddy, hands-on calculus that makes or breaks your year. Because rice, at least this kind of rice, doesn't grow on dry land. It wants its roots submerged but its leaves breathing. It wants still water, not flooding. It wants a layer of mud just firm enough to hold the plant upright but soft enough to allow roots to stretch. You are, quite literally, walking a tightrope made of puddles and timing. Today you're transplanting. It's one of the hardest jobs in the cycle, delicate, repetitive, and strangely calming if you let yourself fall into the rhythm. You reach into a shallow basket filled with bright green seedlings. These were sprouted in a nursery bed weeks ago, coddled like newborns, shielded from weeds and greedy insects. Now, they're ready to move. You kneel, again, and begin the task. One hand scoops into the basket, the other jabs a neat hole into the mud. Each sprout gets its own pocket. Not too deep, not too shallow, spaced just right. You don't have a measuring stick. You just know. Everyone around you does, too. You can hear the splash of feet, the rustle of straw hats, the occasional complaint muttered about sore knees or missing sandals. It's a group effort, sort of. You all work your own plots, but the rhythm is communal. Rows align like the strings of a guillotine, elegant in their uniformity. A flock of ducks waddles nearby, quacking like tiny foremen. And in a weird way, it's beautiful. There's a symmetry to it. A quiet poetry in how these fragile green threads stitch the whole landscape together. The technical term for this method, by the way, is transplanting from seedbeds, and it's what sets southern China apart agriculturally. Instead of sowing rice directly into the paddies, people would grow seedlings first, then move them. It was labor-intensive, but it produced better yields, especially in these monsoon-prone lowlands. The Han didn't invent this process, but they scaled it, refined it, and built infrastructure around it. Irrigation was the backbone. Every village had some version of it, a network of channels, ditches, bunds, and sluice gates, carefully monitored and maintained. And this isn't Roman-style aqueduct grandeur, it's bamboo pipes, stone channels, and elbow grease. If you want more water in your paddies, you don't call an engineer. You grab a shovel. In the distance, a boy yells. Water is spilling over a breach in one of the bunds. You hear the wet slap of feet as half a dozen farmers rush toward the sound. No panic, just routine. They know the drill. A few shovelfuls of clay, some straw reinforcement, and maybe a curse aimed at the ancestors of whoever forgot to check the water level. Within minutes, it's fixed. And that is the essence of this world. Small-scale crises, solved by collective memory and calloused hands. You finish your row and wipe your forehead. A dragonfly hovers in front of your face for a moment, then zips off. You take a breath. The air is thick with moisture and something else, smoke. Someone's burning stalks nearby, turning chaff into ash that'll go back into the field. Nothing is wasted here. Rice husks are fuel. Straw becomes roofing. Mud is bricks. And the water you walk through. It carries not just sediment and frogs but your entire way of life. Now, here's something we don't often talk about. How smart your neighbors are. You might not have a formal education, but you know things that would make an imperial bureaucrat weep into his inkstone. You can predict rain based on frog calls and the shape of the clouds. You know the exact temperature of the mud by how it squishes underfoot. You can walk through mist and smell whether it's good for planting or bad for fungus. Your calendar isn't months and days, it's growth cycles, bird migrations, and how full the river is. And, okay, fine, sometimes it is superstition. Your cousin refuses to plant anything on a full moon unless he's chewed exactly 7 peppercorns first. But you've seen his yields. So you chew the peppercorns too. You're not alone in this wisdom, either. The entire village leans on each other's expertise. One old woman knows how to graft trees without killing them. Another can brew a fermented rice mash so potent it's rumored to make ghosts drunk. And you're the one who figured out how to keep ducks from trampling new seedlings by tying soft bamboo guards to their feet. Seriously, you're basically a genius. Even in the middle of all this mud and heat and duck poop, you're a problem solver. But rice farming in Han China wasn't just science. It was also spiritual. The land had moods. The weather had opinions. The river wasn't just a source of water, it was a god with a bad temper and no sense of timing. There were rituals for everything. You poured rice wine at the head of the irrigation ditch before opening it for the first time each season. You tied red cloths to the oldest tree by the field, asking for protection. You said little prayers to the earth spirits, even if you didn't believe them, just in case they were listening. That evening, as the sun melts into the horizon, painting the paddies in gold and blood orange, you walk home. You're tired. Your knees pop. Your hands are stained green and brown. But your rows are straight. Your seedlings are in. Your ducks are fed. And your neighbor didn't flood your field this time. That's a good day. Tomorrow you'll do it again. And again. And again. Because this is more than farming. It's legacy. It's inheritance. It's how you stay alive. And it's how you make sure that the people you love stay alive, too. And somewhere, hundreds of miles away, a court official is reading your tax report, sipping wine made from your rice, thinking, "Ah, the South's yields are good this year." He has no idea what it took. You wake up before the light. The crickets are still whispering when you shuffle out into the yard, rubbing sleep from your eyes and trying not to stub your toe on the doorframe. The air is sticky already, one of those mornings that smells like warm pond water and wood smoke, and the sky hasn't even decided what color it wants to be. Your breath is shallow from the humidity, your muscles stiff from yesterday's transplanting, and your stomach is growling. But there's no time to dwell on any of that. Today's a big day. You're reinforcing your field buns. Again. Now, before your brain checks out and mumbles something about just more dirt walls, hold on. Because these earthen ridges, called buns, aren't just walkways between fields or places for ducks to gossip. They're the skeletal structure of your entire operation. They hold the water in. They guide the flow. They mark boundaries. And they quietly decide whether your seedlings live long enough to become dinner. You grab your hoe. It's nothing fancy, wooden handle, iron blade darkened from years of sweat and river silt. You've patched it so many times it feels more like an heirloom than a tool. And off you go, squelching down the narrow path that threads between paddies. Water reflects your movement like a ghost trailing behind you. The buns are everywhere, some raised a foot or two above the fields, some barely a hump. Each one handmade, packed from clay and loam, and shaped with care. They're like living things, honestly. Constantly eroding, shifting, cracking under the weight of water, or, if you're really unlucky, collapsing when a wild pig decides to go joy diving through your plot. Your task today is simple in theory. Find the weak spots, patch them up, and re-smear the outer edges to keep everything watertight. In practice, it's like patching a colander with chewing gum. You squat and press your hands into the soil. The morning chill seeps into your palms as you pack down a leaky section. Somewhere nearby, a frog plops into the water. Birds are starting to chatter. And behind you, your younger cousin is whining again about his back. "You're 16, you mutter, not even turning around. "Your back is fine." He makes a noise like a dying goose and flops onto the path, dramatically cradling his spine. You chuck a fistful of damp dirt at him. It's basically tradition at this point. But this banter isn't just comic relief. It's the heartbeat of your day. Farming's not solitary, even if your plot is your own. You trade labor with neighbors, swap jokes while hauling compost, borrow tools and return them blunt. There's a rhythm to it, like a well-rehearsed song everyone knows without ever writing it down. And then, because you knew it was coming, you spot the footprints. Not human, cloven, deep. Right along the edge of your southern paddy. You groan. Water buffalo. One of the neighbor's beasts has gone rogue again, and now your buns got hoof-sized craters and the water's seeping into the wrong field. You mutter something unflattering under your breath and trudge over to assess the damage. This is the downside of communal farming in the Han floodplains. Shared resources also mean shared problems. Your buffalo may be well behaved, but your neighbors? Not so much. And fencing isn't exactly a thing here, not on any meaningful scale. Animals roam. Kids roam. Chickens definitely roam. You've had more than one seedbed trampled by poultry with no regard for crop yield statistics. Still, you sigh, press your heels into the mud, and get to work. Rebuilding a bund isn't about slapping some dirt together. It's an art. You want just the right clay content. Too sandy and it crumbles, too heavy and it cracks. You mix in straw for flexibility, maybe some ash from last night's fire to help bind it. If you're feeling fancy, you pat the surface with a bamboo mat to smooth it like icing on a cake. And then, for good measure, you dig a trench along one side, your drainage ditch. Because standing water is good for rice but bad for buns. Let it overflow too often, and erosion turns your masterpiece into soup. It's a strange dance, really. You want water to stay, but not too much. You want soil to hold, but not harden. You're Goldilocks in a straw hat, testing textures with your toes and murmuring to puddles like a very muddy wizard. Oh, and just to spice things up, historians still argue whether these bund networks were coordinated by village elders or just organically emerged from neighborly cooperation. Some say Han administrators sent out land surveyors to standardize plots and water rights. Others argue it was a bottom-up system, guided more by gossip and grudges than government. Either way, you're the one out here ankle-deep in sludge, not some silk-robed bureaucrat cataloging grain taxes. By late morning, the bund's reinforced and the crisis is averted. For now, you dust your hands off and allow yourself a rare break. You sit on a dry ridge, legs dangling over one patty, and pull out your breakfast, a sticky rice ball wrapped in lotus leaf. It's still warm, slightly sweet, and tastes better than anything served in the palace. You glance around. The fields shimmer. Ducks meander. Cicadas tune up like nature's kettle drum. And then, you hear it. The water wheel. Squeak creak, squeak creak. It's a two-man job, turning that wooden beast. One walks the treadles, using foot power to rotate the wheel. The other feeds water into bamboo shoots, guiding it from a lower channel to the higher paddy. It's primitive, sure, but genius. The Han weren't messing around when it came to low-tech hydraulics. That wheel might not look impressive, but it's saving someone hours of bucket hauling. And get this, some of these wheels were powered by pedal cranks and foot treadles, an early cousin to the bicycle. There were even proto-chain mechanisms, centuries before Europe caught on. Bet you didn't expect rice farming to come with a dash of steampunk. Later, as the sun arcs overhead and your cousin finally stops whining long enough to help, you get back to your bund inspection. One has started to sprout weeds. Bad news. Weeds weaken the structure, invite insects, and could clog your narrow irrigation channels. You yank them out, muttering curses with each tug, pretending each stalk is a tax collector. Your village doesn't have maps of the system. No blueprints. No spreadsheets. But it works. It's memory-powered infrastructure, updated with each season and rebuilt by calloused consensus. You know which bund collapsed during the Dragon Boat Festival storm 2 years ago. Your aunt remembers the time a snake curled up inside one. Your grandpa swears there's a bund near the old mulberry tree that's cursed because a merchant buried his debts under it. Is any of that true? Who knows? But you reinforce that bund extra thoroughly, just in case. As the day fades and the sun lowers like a dropped coin, you survey your work. Your bunds are sturdy. Your channels are clear. The fields, your fields, hold water like cupped hands. And you hold pride. Quiet, squishy, very muddy pride. You trudge home with dirt in your teeth and satisfaction in your bones. The bunds will hold through the night. And tomorrow, you do it all over again. Because this isn't just farming. It's sculpting the land to your will. It's civil engineering with a side of sunburn. It's coaxing the earth into a cradle for your dinner. And it's beautiful in its messiness. Even if your back is still killing you. So, you're up again before the birds, but this time, there's tension in the air. And no, it's not just the low-hanging mist that clings to your shins like a needy cat. Something's different today. You step out and spot a neighbor adjusting his tunic, hair slicked down like he's about to meet royalty. You squint. He is about to meet royalty. Or at least the next best thing in your muddy little world, the land registrar. Yeah. Bureaucracy has entered the chat. See, as much as you'd like to imagine that your rice paddy exists in some cozy vacuum, just you, the frogs, and the occasional goat, it doesn't. This is the Han Dynasty. And the Han Dynasty counts. Everything. Taxes, harvests, field sizes, how many people live in your household, even the number of plows you own. If it can be measured, it's going in a ledger somewhere, carried by a man with a scroll case and absolutely no sense of humor. Today's the inspection. You trudge to the edge of your plot and try to make it look slightly less like it was trampled by a herd of party-obsessed ducks. Your buns are still holding strong, and your young rice shoots are perky and hopeful, waving gently in the breeze like they're saying, "Don't you dare fine us." The registrar arrives mid-morning, flanked by 2 assistants holding ink tablets and bamboo pens. He's wearing those square robes that make everyone look like they've swallowed a folding screen. His shoes are clean. Suspiciously clean. You instantly distrust him. He squints at your field, then at you, then at his notes. "So, farmer, you," he says, pausing awkwardly because your name is smeared with pond water on his list. You nod, resisting the urge to salute him with your hoe. He steps gingerly along the bund, muttering measurements to his assistant. They note the width of your field, the water depth, even how close your rice is to sprouting panicles. It's all about yield projections, you see. Because your taxes? Yeah, they're paid in grain. Not money. Not labor. Literal sacks of your future lunch. This brings us to an important point, the grain quota. During the Han, rice taxes varied depending on geography and local administration, but typically, households gave up to 1/3 of their harvest to the state. 1/3. That's the chunk you surrender before you've even figured out how many rats will get to your granary this year. And if your yield drops due to floods or pests, good luck explaining that to someone who's never stood knee-deep in leeches trying to shoo away snails with a stick. The system was called zhongshu, a tribute method that depended on accurate land registration. And guess what? Every time they redrew your field size or bumped your productivity tier, your quota changed. Often up, rarely down. Historians still argue whether these inspections were genuinely fair or just another excuse to squeeze the countryside dry. Some records suggest local officials fudged numbers to meet imperial targets, while others hint that farmers themselves hid yield to avoid heavier tribute. You've buried a couple of full sacks behind your cousin's shed before. For emergency duck feed, of course. Totally unrelated. After an hour of squinting, scribbling, and suspicious toe prodding of your seedbed, the registrar finally nods. "Adequate," he mutters, like that's some kind of gold medal. You smile politely, then immediately pull a face when he turns his back. Your neighbor catches it and snorts. You both crack up, quiet enough not to get fined for impudence. Again. Later that afternoon, once the tax train has moved on to the next unfortunate soul, you return to your favorite task, eavesdropping. Because behind all this formal record-keeping is an informal web of gossip thicker than the summer mud. Who bribed the registrar last year with fermented fish? Who's secretly planting double the legal rice and hiding the rest under bamboo baskets? Who's letting their water buffalo accidentally graze into someone else's lotus pond? This matters. Because Han rice farming wasn't done in isolation. Your field connects to your neighbor's, which connects to his aunt's, which links to an uncle 3 plots down who hasn't spoken to your cousin since the Great Sickle Incident of Year 6. You share water. You trade seedlings. You argue over canal rights during droughts. You might be a farmer, but you're also a diplomat. Take today, for example. You notice someone upstream has adjusted their sluice gate, just slightly, but it's enough to shift water away from your paddies. Your seedlings are frowning. You march over, acting casual. "Oh hey," you say. "Your channel looks, creative." They laugh nervously. "Just doing some maintenance." "Haha, you know how it is." You nod. "Of course. Just don't forget we're planting on the same moon cycle this year. Be a shame if anyone got thirsty." It's all very friendly. Very accidental. Very, don't make me bring this up at the temple assembly. And speaking of temple assemblies, let's talk about them. Once every few weeks, your village elders gather at the local shrine to sort out communal issues. These meetings are half civic administration, half theatrical performance. People air grievances, swap field updates, and occasionally bring samples of blighted rice plants like some kind of agricultural courtroom drama. "Your ducks definitely gave my field root rot," someone might say. "Your field already looked rotten. comes the reply. The presiding elder bangs his stick. Everyone pretends to calm down. No one actually changes. But these assemblies do something valuable. They maintain balance. They're how Han communities adapted to the uncertainties of weather, politics, and bugs. Sure, the Emperor may sit on a jade throne in Chang'an, but you survived because old Auntie Mei Lin remembered to bring freshwater snails to seed the paddies after a flood. Which brings us to a fringe-wide tidbit. Some farmers used powdered fish bones as a soil enhancer, claiming it kept the spirits of the earth happy and the rice green. Not exactly state-sanctioned advice, but hey, it seemed to work. As the sun sets, you gather around the fire pit with a bowl of boiled rice and pickled greens. The inspection is over. The gossip is juicy. And tomorrow brings the next wave of drama. Canal cleaning duty. Oh yes, the ancient equivalent of neighborhood trash day. Can't wait. For now though, you lean back against a straw bundle, exhale the weight of quotas and measurements, and let the smell of wood smoke soothe your sore shoulders. The frogs are singing again. Your buns are glowing orange in the twilight. You survived another day of state scrutiny and watery diplomacy. Barely. It's barely dawn and already your foot is in something squelchy. You don't even look down. At this point, if it's not biting, you're fine with it. Today is Canal Cleaning Day, a joyous occasion where the entire village bands together to dredge out mud, debris, and the occasional long-forgotten sandal from the water channels that crisscross your rice fields like the veins of some massive, half-submerged dragon. These canals are your lifelines. Without them, the paddies dry up, the rice dies, and the tax collectors come back with even less patience and more forms. You grab your spade and wade toward the meeting point, where half the village has already gathered with rakes, buckets, and expressions ranging from grim determination to the kind of barely contained glee that suggests someone's looking forward to this way too much. That someone is Auntie Juan. She's already knee-deep in sludge, flinging muck onto the banks like it personally insulted her mother. "Come on, slowpokes," she cackles. "You want to eat this year, don't you?" You sigh, roll up your trousers, and wade in. The canals aren't just ditches, they're carefully engineered structures, built to guide water from rivers and reservoirs across miles of fields with enough precision to irrigate rice without drowning the plants. This isn't a new thing. Han engineers used surveying tools like the Jew, a kind of measuring square, to maintain slope and flow. They understood gradients well enough to create entire systems of gravity-fed irrigation, complete with sluices and lock gates that could rival modern suburban plumbing. Kind of. The problem is, canals don't clean themselves. And between weeds, dead fish, leaf litter, and the occasional mischievous child launching pottery shards for fun, things get gunky. Fast. So, here you are, spade in one hand, woven basket in the other, scooping sludge and clearing blockages like your survival depends on it. Because it does. You work in teams. Some villagers drag long-handled rakes through the water, stirring up silt and snapping off overgrown aquatic weeds. Others shovel out the gooey mess and dump it into reed-lined pits along the banks. The younger kids run messages, and sometimes pranks, back and forth. And then there's Old Man Wei, who mostly yells advice from the shade. Pull from the sides, not just the middle. You're not churning butter. You pretend not to hear him. Everyone pretends not to hear him. As the sun rises, the air turns thick and sticky. Dragonflies buzz past your ears like tiny, iridescent helicopters. Frogs leap from your path with wet slaps. And somewhere downstream, someone shrieks. You pause. "Snake!" A voice cries. "Not again," someone groans. The canal has a bit of a reputation. Namely, for being home to a sacred eel, or at least, what your neighbor insists is one. According to her, it's 200 years old, wears a mustache like a village elder, and only appears during canal cleaning because it enjoys the vibrations. You've never seen it. But the idea of a divine, whiskered water guardian that blesses rice yields if you leave it sticky rice cakes. Yeah. That's the kind of folklore that crops up when your entire life revolves around muddy water. Fringe. Definitely. Harmless. Probably. At least until the kids start tossing dumplings into the canal like offerings to a noodle deity. But it's not all whimsy and eel sightings. Canal cleaning also means conflict. There's always someone who didn't show up. Someone who hurt their back, or had to take their cousin's goat to the healer, or simply forgot what day it was despite this happening every month. And when they skip, the rest of you pick up the slack. That breeds resentment. You see Jiang anywhere. Auntie Juan mutters, not even pausing her raking. You shake your head. Figures. I'll bet he's napping in his storage shed again. Or polishing his jade hairpin, someone snorts. Historians still argue whether Han communal labor requirements like these were genuinely equitable or more exploitative in practice. Officially, families were expected to contribute manpower to local projects like irrigation maintenance or road repair. But enforcement, that varied wildly. Sometimes, people who skipped out faced fines. Other times, social shaming did the trick. Occasionally, a dispute would escalate into an actual brawl during the temple festival. You remember that year vividly. So does your still missing left sandal. You pause to wipe your brow, squinting up at the sun as it rises higher. The muck glistens, thick with decomposed plant matter and old fish bones. The smell is potent. Like if someone left a seafood stew out during a heat wave and then invited a goat to sit in it. But hey, progress. By midday, the main canal is flowing more freely. The water, once sluggish and greenish, now glimmers and babbles like it actually wants to be helpful. You patch up a crumbling sluice gate with woven reed mats, tightening the ropes that control its little wooden door. Every minute you spend fine-tuning water flow now could mean the difference between a lush harvest and a rice desert later. And as you rest under a fig tree with a handful of rice balls and a boiled egg, the elders circle around, taking stock of the work. They nod approvingly. One even grunts, which is basically applause. There's a sense of pride. You did this. Together. The canal flows because you made it happen. Sure, you'll probably wake up tomorrow feeling like a mule kicked you, but still, worth it. You nibble your egg and listen to the lazy ripple of water running past your boots. A dragonfly lands on your knee. The sacred eel is nowhere to be seen, but someone swears they heard it giggle. As the day ends, the gossip begins anew. Did you see how Feng tried to claim he built that whole drainage fork? Please. The only thing Feng builds is excuses. I heard his sister bribed the registrar with candied lotus root. You think that works? I've been hoarding persimmons for months. You smile. Some things never change. You head home, muscles aching, hands blistered, but spirit buoyant. Your fields will be well watered this week. Your neighbors aren't too annoyed with each other, yet. And you even scored an extra dumpling from Old Man Wei's lunch basket. Victory. You rinse off with a ladle of cool water from your storage jar and flop down onto your mat, arms splayed. The sounds of the village swirl around you. Children laughing, water trickling, frogs waking up for their nightly symphony. The sacred eel, if it exists, is probably off reviewing performance evaluations from today's labor. You drift towards sleep, smelling faintly of mud, rice, and the strange satisfaction of a job no one wanted to do, but everyone needed. Your bones still hum from yesterday's canal slog, but there's no rest today, not when the rice starts whispering. You step into the paddies at dawn, the surface of the water a slick mirror that ripples at your touch. Tiny green blades poke up in neat rows, impossibly fragile and somehow unshakably confident. These are your transplants, delicate little rice seedlings moved from nursery plots to their forever homes in the paddies you cleared and flooded by hand. And now, they begin to change. You bend low and inspect a single plant. Its roots have anchored, clutching the muddy floor like it knows this is serious. Above the water, the shoots stretch upward, not fast enough to see, but fast enough to feel if you watch for a moment too long. This is the tillering phase, where one shoot becomes many. Each tiller is a potential panicle, and each panicle could mean dozens of grains. You are, in effect, watching a multiplication spell. But only if you get everything right. Water depth? Crucial. You keep it ankle high, any deeper, and the young plants might drown. Any shallower, and weeds will take over like unpaid cousins at a festival. So, each morning and evening, you walk the edges of your field, adjusting the bamboo sluices with practiced flicks. The gates creak. The water answers. You become a conductor, coaxing your flooded symphony into harmony. The humidity is thick. Somewhere nearby, a heron caws. Dragonflies hover like tiny surveillance drones. You squint at the sky, doing mental calculations your ancestors passed down without ever using numbers. Feels like the solstice is creeping close. You murmur. That means more sun, faster growth, and the bugs. Oh yes, here they come. You swat at a mosquito the size of your thumbnail, miss, and watch it settle smugly on your calf. Bugs are an unholy part of this whole equation. Some are helpful: spiders, certain beetles, even a few terrifyingly large frogs with mouths big enough to unhinge small snakes. But others: stem borers, leaf hoppers, brown plant hoppers. The kind of names that sound vaguely cute until you see what they do to a plant. That's why you have duck patrol. Yes, ducks. Han Dynasty farmers pioneered integrated pest management long before the term existed. They raised flocks of ducks specifically to waddle through paddies, devouring insects without disturbing the rice. And let's be honest, watching a duck storm through a field like a waddling warlord is the best part of your day. You signal your little squad, 5 feathered mercenaries with excellent names like General Quack and Miss Peep. They march in. Within minutes, the bug population is in freefall. You sit on the bank, sipping warm barley tea from a gourd and watching them go to work like it's dinner theater. But pest control's only one part. You're also constantly on weed patrol. Most Han farmers didn't have chemical herbicides. What you did have was your own aching back and a wicked little hand hoe. Every few days, you shuffle through the rows, pulling and scraping, trying to make sure nothing robs your rice of water or light. That's when you notice something. One patch of rice looks stunted. Not sickly, just slower. The leaves are a paler green, the tillers fewer. You frown, kneel, and dip your fingers into the mud. It's cooler, still, almost unnaturally so. You suspect compaction. Maybe the soil here didn't drain as well before planting. Or maybe, just maybe, a spirit's displeased. Auntie Juan swears the land remembers who treads lightly and who doesn't. You'll give it extra compost tomorrow, just in case. Speaking of compost, have we talked about night soil? Yes, it is exactly what it sounds like. You have a sealed pit behind your house where family waste ferments into surprisingly potent fertilizer. It's a pungent process, and your little brother once dropped his toy sword in there and cried for 3 days. But it works. And as a fringe tidbit, some wealthier landowners in the Han period paid collectors to gather waste from inns and latrines in town for their private fields. It was the original urban recycling. Of course, scholars still debate whether overuse of such fertilizers contributed to soil acidification in some regions. It's one of those questions without a clear answer, and one that smells terrible to investigate. You shuffle back into the field. Around you, the tillers keep multiplying. Some rice varieties only produce 5 to 7 per plant. Others, 15, 20. More if they're lucky, or if you're very, very nice to them. Timing is everything now. Too much water, and you risk rot. Too little, and the rice thinks it's dying, panics, and flowers early. You joke that rice is like your uncle's cat, picky, melodramatic, and capable of going feral if slightly annoyed. But there's a rhythm here. You wake early, check the water, tend the ducks, weed the rows, monitor color changes in the leaves. Lime green means hungry, rich dark green means happy, purple tips might mean iron deficiency, or a trick of the light. You don't keep journals. You keep memory. And then comes the wind. One afternoon, while you're crouched tying up a broken sluice latch, a breeze brushes across the field and something changes. The rice rustles, not just in reaction, but in participation. The tillers sway, flicker, shift like they're doing a coordinated dance. You stand slowly, heart thudding. It's subtle. If you weren't so attuned, you'd miss it. The rice is preparing to shoot. This is the next stage, when those dense tillers begin building up to a growth spurt that will push the panicle, the grain-bearing head, upward in a single, elegant thrust. It's still days away, maybe even weeks. But it starts here, with a whisper. You kneel again and press your palm to the mud. The field is warm. The soil is firm but soft. The water is clear. Everything is aligned. And you suddenly realize that all this, every drop of sweat, every duck footprint, every mosquito bite and mud-streaked tunic, is working. The rice is thriving. You grin, muddy and mosquito-bitten and victorious. Back at home that evening, your grandmother pokes her head into the kitchen, holding a bundle of wild chives and pickled radish. "Looks like it's going to be a good year," she says softly. You nod. You don't need omens. You've seen it in the way the rice moved today. And as you drift to sleep, your dreams are full of swaying stalks, shimmering water, and ducks on parade. The harvest is still months away. But now, for the first time, you believe it will come. You wake up to the sound of something rustling. Not in your house, not in the trees, but in your chest. It's anticipation. Something's shifted. Not just in the air, though the humidity feels more determined today, as if the clouds themselves are sweating. Not just in the fields, though the water's been shimmering more than usual, disturbed by what might be fish or maybe just the ghosts of harvests past. No, what's changed is the rice. It's about to bolt. In farming terms, that means the rice plants are on the cusp of shooting. The panicles, those branching heads that carry the actual grains, are preparing to push upward. You feel it like an itch behind your ribs. Your fields have gone quiet in that particular way living things do before they erupt into action. You trudge out into the paddies. The water sloshes around your calves, and the mud tries to keep your shoes as a souvenir. Around you, the rice is still. But it's not really still, is it? Each stalk is subtly thicker. The stems have hardened. The uppermost leaves stand more upright, bristling like tiny flags. You bend down to peer into one shoot's central vein, where the sheath splits, and yes, there it is. A faint swelling. The panicle is forming deep inside. This is the jointing stage, or as your grandfather called it, the time of secrets. The rice hides its most important work inside itself, and your job now is to keep everything perfect until it decides to unveil the goods. No pressure. You spend the day listening more than moving. Every rustle might be a signal. Every flicker of a breeze might be pushing things forward. Even your shadow seems longer today, though you swear the sun hasn't moved. Midday hits, and you catch a break under the shade of a ramshackle straw awning on the field's edge. You sip cool water and nibble dried yam chips. A passing cart bumps along the nearby road. 2 oxen, 1 driver, and a stack of baskets so tall you wonder if it's mostly air. You think we'll make quota, the driver calls. You shrug. If the rice keeps doing what it's doing, we might exceed it. He whistles, half amused, half worried. Careful. That's when inspectors start sniffing around. Ah, yes. Imperial oversight. A gentle reminder that the Han state is watching, not just your yield, but how you got there. Technically, much of this rice belongs to your local magistrate, and some of that belongs to the state granary system. Fail, and you'll get taxed anyway. Succeed too much, and someone's bound to notice your miraculous methods. It's the farmer's paradox. Invisible until failure, punished for success. Still, you do your best. Tonight, you'll do your rounds in the moonlight to check for stem borers. You've heard a rumor that another village lost 10 moo to pests this week. Panicles eaten from the inside out, leaving nothing but hollow husks like ghost shells. You tell yourself it won't happen to your field. But still, you sharpen your torch and wrap a cloth around your mouth for the smell. When the rice finally shoots, it's almost anticlimactic. You're halfway through retying a duck's broken leg splint, don't ask. When you glance up and see them, hundreds, thousands of tiny green arms now rising from the center of the plants like shy dancers at their first recital. The panicles have emerged. You don't shout. You don't call the neighbors. You simply stand there in the middle of the field, ankle deep in water and duck poop, and whisper, "It's time." From this point forward, everything revolves around grain filling. You adjust the water levels again, slightly lower now, to encourage the plants to put energy into their heads, not their roots. It's like telling someone they've got one last month to prep for exams. Focus, focus, focus. You start checking panicles for booting. Not like the kind you wear. This booting refers to the moment the panicle swells within the sheath just before emerging. Timing is crucial here. If the weather gets too cold, or too hot, or the wind too strong, pollination can fail. And if pollination fails? No grain. Just pretty plants waving their empty hands. You shake your head. It's absurd how much drama hides in these stalks. By evening, the fields have changed again. The rice is suddenly louder, not literally, but in presence. The leaves shimmer gold-green in the dying light. The panicles have a kind of sheen to them. Even the ducks seem impressed. You sit at the edge of the paddy with your grandmother, who hands you a bowl of sweet barley soup. She doesn't say anything for a while. Then, quietly, looks like it's blessing you back. You raise an eyebrow. The rice. She nods. You gave it time. You listened. You didn't try to rush it. You sip your soup, not entirely convinced that a plant can be grateful, but not willing to risk the bad karma of doubting it, either. Somewhere behind you, your little cousin sets off a firecracker for no good reason. You flinch, spill a bit of soup, and glare. Why? Scares away spirits, he chirps. You roll your eyes. It scares away my hearing. Still, you don't stop him. There are worse superstitions. In the following days, the real magic begins. The panicles fill, each tiny grain swelling with starch, maturing from milky white to firm and golden. You gently press a few grains between your fingers each day, judging their progress like a chef testing pasta. Once, your hand brushes something unexpected, a warm lump under the stalk. You jolt back, only to realize it's a sunbathing snake. You both stare at each other for a long second before the snake slithers off, offended by your poor manners. You make a mental note to step more carefully tomorrow. Evenings are now marked by a new ritual, singing to the rice. It started as a joke between you and your brother, some off-key humming while you worked late. But one night, you notice that the birds don't dive-bomb the fields when you sing. Coincidence? Maybe. But now, every night, as the sun dips below the mountains, your voice rises. Sometimes your grandmother joins in. Sometimes the neighbors do too. It becomes a kind of sleepy concert, a lullaby for the land. Quirky. Absolutely. Effective. Who knows? But the fields seem to respond. There's a softness in the air now, like the rice is leaning into your songs, swaying to their rhythm. And you, mud-streaked, sunburned, duck wrangling you feel something unfamiliar rising in your chest. Hope. Not just for a good harvest, but for the idea that maybe, just maybe, all this effort is worth it. That tomorrow, when you check the grains again, they'll be just a little fuller. A little closer to ready. And one day soon, you'll walk into this field, reach out, and find a stalk so heavy with grain that it bows to you. Like it knows who's been watching. Who's been waiting? Dawn isn't shy this morning. It pours over the floodplain like warm milk, thick and golden, soaking everything in light. And as you blink against the haze, rubbing a mosquito bite on your neck, you know, it's almost time. The rice is mature. You don't even need to step into the paddy to tell. The panicles have lost their early green luster. Now they sag heavy and low, straw-colored and soft-edged like the curve of a contented belly after a big meal. Some droop so far they brush the surface of the water, their tips glistening with dew and anticipation. But this moment, this verge of harvest feeling, it's not all celebration. No, this is the tightrope walk, the final balancing act. You're watching for the sweet spot, too early and the grains are too moist and chalky, too late and they shatter with a whisper and fall to the mud below. The field is buzzing. Not metaphorically. Actual buzzing. Dragonflies dart among the stalks like tiny helicopters on patrol. Grasshoppers leap from leaf to leaf, crunching wherever they go. And the ducks? Oh, the ducks are unbothered as ever, waddling through this golden sea with the casual confidence of royalty. You pick a stalk and gently nibble one grain between your front teeth. It's firm, crunchy. A faint sweetness lingers. You nod. 2 more days. Maybe 3. Now comes what your uncle calls the harvest haiku, short, frantic, and packed with unspoken meaning. Everyone's movements grow sharper. You oil the sickles, test the baskets for cracks, and run your hands over the storage bins one more time. Each bin is lined with dried banana leaves and charcoal ash to keep out insects and moisture. A few are already pre-seeded with star anise and dried chili, folk remedies to repel weevils that, admittedly, smell kind of nice. Your cousin, freshly returned from a nearby town, offers up a new idea. We should dry the grains on bamboo mats instead of bare earth. They'll get less dirty. You snort. Where are you gonna find that many mats? I know a guy. There's always a guy. But you agree. Cleaner rice means better flavor. Better flavor means better trade. Better trade means maybe, just maybe, you get to buy new sandals before the rainy season ends. Harvest Day arrives like a festival and a funeral combined. Joy and pressure, hand in hand. The sun rises early, and so do you. The family assembles with baskets, sickles, headscarves, and a suspicious number of snacks tucked into waistbands. Your grandmother leads the first cut, as tradition demands. She stoops low, grabs a bunch of stalks, and slices in one practiced motion. Just like that, the season is over, and a new one begins. You follow, moving in a slow rhythm, slicing handfuls of rice with that satisfying shik-shik sound. The panicles fall into your basket with a dry rustle, like whispers of thanks. After 20 minutes, your back already protests. After 2 hours, you stop noticing, and then something weird happens. You start humming. It just happens. A low tune you barely recognize, something your mother used to sing while she combed your hair with coconut oil. Within minutes, others pick it up. Suddenly the whole field is a choir, off-key, muddy, sunburned, and utterly magnificent. Even the birds seem to pause mid-flight, like, wait, what's this? Your little cousin starts a call and response chant involving ducks and ghosts, and somehow it works. The work moves faster. After hours of cutting, stacking, and loading, you begin tying the bundles together for transport. Each sheaf is as tall as a 5-year-old and weighs more than your weekly ego. You secure them with rice straw rope, braided thick and knotted with one of 3 approved methods passed down from your grandfather, who, according to family lore, once tied a bundle so tight it fossilized. Once stacked, the bundles are loaded onto bamboo sleds dragged by oxen. The oxen do not share your enthusiasm. They stare blankly ahead like reluctant philosophers, pausing now and then to chew cud in exaggerated slow motion. Back home, the drying begins. You lay out mats across the courtyard, sweep them clean, and arrange the sheaves in tidy rows. The grains must dry evenly under the sun for several days. Too wet, and they'll rot in storage. Too dry, and they'll crack during milling. You check moisture levels the old-fashioned way. Bite, squeeze, guess. At night, you cover the mats with woven sheets and place small fires around them to keep out dew. It's a game of patience, precision, and pest control. One evening, as you're brushing some stray rice grains back onto the mats, you notice something odd. Tiny footprints. Not duck, not cat. Rat. A few minutes later, you find the culprit, a furry blur darting into the granary corner with an entire stalk between its teeth. Oh no you don't, you mutter, grabbing a nearby stick. It's a short chase, involving 3 overturned baskets, a bruised elbow, and a scream you'll deny came from you. But in the end, the rat escapes. You name him Sun Wukong, after the trickster monkey from legend. He earns the title. Now the threshing begins. You gather the dried bundles and beat them against wooden racks or stone slabs to separate the grains. The sound is rhythmic, thunderous, satisfying, like 100 fists knocking politely on history's door. The chaff, those thin husks, flies everywhere. Some clings to your sweaty arms. Some floats upward like gold leaf caught in a breeze. Your cousin sneezes 14 times in a row. A record. Once threshed, the grains are winnowed. This is the dance of the baskets. You scoop up handfuls of rice and chaff, toss them gently into the air, and let the breeze separate the heavier grains from the lighter husks. Done well, it's mesmerizing. Done poorly, and you'll be picking rice out of your neighbor's roof tiles for a week. As you toss the grains, you think about what you're actually holding. Calories, currency, culture. 1,000 years from now, someone will still be eating rice in this region. They may not know your name, but their bowl will echo your labor. Historians still argue whether rice agriculture in the Han Dynasty was primarily state-driven or more localized and communal. Based on how sore your shoulders feel and how many rats you've chased this week, you vote for definitely communal with extra chaos. The harvest is nearly over. Your granary bins are full. Your fingers are blistered. Your heart, weirdly, is light. There's one final task, offering. You select the best bundle of rice, the one with the heaviest, plumpest panicles, and set it aside. It'll go on the household altar tomorrow, a quiet thank you to the ancestors, to the earth, to whatever it is that makes rice grow and birds sing and snakes ignore you when you sing off key. You sit at the edge of your drying mats, watching the last of the day's light filter through the grain. It's soft, warm, humble, like the work you've just done. Not flashy, not fast, but real, human. You run your hand through the drying rice and smile. The floodplain is empty now, quiet again, but you swear it's breathing. You wake to the sound of wooden paddles clacking in rhythm. No drums, no bells, just that steady thunk-thunk, the music of post-harvest labor. It's husking day, and the rice doesn't polish itself. The courtyard smells like sun-warmed grain and yesterday's sweat. You stretch, cracking joints you didn't know you had, and shuffle toward the rhythmic noise like a moth toward flame, or more accurately, like a teenager trying to delay inevitable chores. There they are, two aunties at the foot-pounded mortar, working the dual-paddle husking machine. One steps while the other rests. The paddles slam into the mortar pit where baskets of dried rice await their final transformation. It's slow, repetitive, and wildly effective. But you're assigned to the hand mill. The hand mill is a flat stone bowl with a heavy, circular top stone. There's a hole in the center where you pour the grains. You grab the wooden handle sticking out from the top, and you start to rotate. Clockwise. Over and over. The first 5 minutes are fine. The next 25 are not. By the time you're done with your first batch, you've learned several new swear words in your head. You'd never say them aloud. Your grandmother would personally tan your hide with a sandal, and your forearms feel like they've wrestled an ox. And lost. As the husks loosen and separate, you scoop the mixture into wide bamboo trays. Then comes another round of winnowing, this time more delicate. You need to blow away the papery husks while keeping every precious kernel. A quick flick of the wrist. A gentle breath. A practiced pause while you wait for the chaff to flutter away like ashes from a fading fire. A breeze kicks up and half your tray spills. You blink, look up, and say, deadpan, thanks, universe. Someone snorts behind you. It's your cousin. Beginner's breeze, he shrugs, shaking his tray perfectly. Show off. Eventually, the grains are husked, but not polished. Here's the thing. In Han China, most folks eat whole grain rice, what you might now call brown rice, because it stores longer, is less prone to spoilage, and frankly, polishing is a luxury. Still, some families do it for special occasions. Yours. You're celebrating a full yield and no broken limbs. That counts. So out comes the polishing mill. It's a longer, horizontal version of the pounding pit. A log-shaped roller turns inside a hollowed trough, scrubbing off the bran layer. Your cousin insists this is absolutely necessary for proper mouthfeel. You think it's mostly a flex. It takes hours, and the yield is small, but the polished rice shines with a faint golden gleam, pearls of labor, tucked away in clay jars for a lucky meal sometime soon. While you work, your grandfather decides it's time for stories. He lowers himself onto a stool, pulls out his pipe, and begins, eyes half closed, voice syrupy slow. When I was your age, he says, a trader came to our village with rice so fragrant, the emperor's own cooks cried when they tasted it. You roll your eyes, but you're hooked. He claimed it came from a village that grew rice by moonlight only. No sun at all. Said it absorbed dreams instead of light. Grandpa, rice can't grow without sun. He puffs. That's what I said. He told me I was too grounded. Maybe he meant pounded, your aunt mutters, never stopping her steady rhythm with the husking paddle. The story spins on, mixing myth and memory until it's hard to tell which is which. That's how most things go around here. Later, as dusk rolls in and the courtyard cools, your family gathers to count and weigh the rice. Each batch is tagged with a bamboo tally stick, 1 notch per dough, or roughly 10 liters. Everyone breathes a little easier when the final count is announced. It's good. Better than expected. Enough to eat, save, and trade. But just barely. And here's the thing, even with all this rice, you're still a tenant. That means a share, sometimes as much as 40%, goes straight to the landowner. You tie up those sacks with the same care as your own, but something in your stomach tightens as you do. Your father says, that's just the way it is. Your mother replies, it won't always be. Historians still argue whether Han-era land tenancy was oppressive or just unevenly distributed. Some documents paint landlords as community leaders, responsible for fairness and local infrastructure. Others show them squeezing tenants for every last grain. Most likely, it was both, depending on your fortune and who you were related to. But today, you don't dwell. You just haul sacks. Once the landowner's share is delivered by ox cart, with ceremonial bows and a gift basket of dried fish, it's time to plan your portion. Some of it is for food, obviously. Some for seed. Some for trade. A tiny bit goes into a hidden crock under the hearth, your mother's emergency stash, off limits unless the roof collapses or someone loses a finger in the threshing pit. Both have happened. A small amount is set aside for rice wine. This part of the process is less sacred and more chaotic. You join your uncle in the small fermentation shed, which smells like sour fruit and wet socks. He's already mashed the cooked rice and mixed it with chew, a fermentation starter made from wheat and wild yeasts. It bubbles faintly in its jar. Want to stir it? He asks. You do. It's like poking a sleeping animal. Warm. Alive. Strange. You stir in slow circles, and your uncle grins. That'll be drinkable in a month, he says. Or maybe explosive. Hard to tell. The evening ends with a bowl of fresh cooked rice for dinner. You chew slowly. It tastes like earth, sun, and a whole lot of back pain. And also pride. Over dinner, your mother retells a ghost story she swears is true. A rice farmer who stole from his neighbor's field, only to be haunted by disembodied footsteps until he confessed. Your cousin pretends to be scared, then mimics footsteps behind you the whole walk back to your sleeping mat. Classic. That night, you lie under the stars, full and tired. The air smells of dry chaff and roasted garlic. And you wonder, what if the rice really does remember who planted it? The next morning, your muscles ache in places you didn't even know had names. Your arms feel like they've been pounded into rice flour, your back is a tightly wound string, and your knees crack with every step. But there's no time to complain, not when it's market day. You bundle the polished rice in tightly tied sacks of woven reed, each stamped with your family's mark, a simple swish of ink resembling a reed stalk. It's not fancy, but it's recognizable. Recognition, in this world, is currency. Your family loads the cart, your strongest ox at the helm, your father holding the reins, and you tucked beside sacks that creak with every bump. The cart rolls slowly down the dirt path, ruts and all, toward the village marketplace. The ride is long enough for a nap, but short enough that you can't really settle. You pass other carts, some heavier, some lighter. You nod at faces familiar and unfamiliar. There's a woman with a towering load of millet, a boy balancing squawking ducks in baskets, and a monk carrying exactly one basket of mushrooms and exactly zero explanation for where he got them. By the time you arrive, the square is already bustling. This isn't a capital market like Chang'an or Luoyang, where court musicians, foreign diplomats, and acrobats jostle for space, but it's lively in its own way. The air is thick with a stew of smells: soy, smoke, sweet persimmon, fermented tofu, and the occasional unmistakable tang of livestock manure. You help unload the cart near your family's usual patch, wedged between a woman selling silkworm cocoons and an old man hawking tiny ceramic horses that no one ever seems to buy but that he insists are collector's items. You sprinkle a little water on the rice sacks to make the grains look plumper. Everyone does it. You'd call it marketing, but your uncle calls it hydrated honesty. The buyers start to arrive. First come the households, older women with sharp eyes and sharper tongues who inspect the grains like they're examining gemstones. Then come the restaurant buyers. They speak fast, haggle hard, and smell faintly of duck fat. One of them always tries to talk you down on price by claiming last year's harvest was sweeter. You just smile and say, "This year's has better mouthfeel." It works more often than you'd expect. There's one new face this time, a tax inspector from the prefecture. His robes are freshly pressed, his hands unnaturally clean, and his expression says, "I've never harvested a single grain, but I will judge you." He kneels, lifts a palmful of rice, and rolls it between his fingers like he's reading your family's fate in the grains. "Too damp," he mutters. You blink. "It's the morning dew," you reply, keeping your tone as light as possible. He narrows his eyes, holds your rice up to the light, then pulls out a tiny folding balance scale from inside his sleeve. You didn't even see it there. This is very official behavior. He weighs the rice, proclaims it acceptable, and moves on. Your father exhales so slowly you almost don't hear it. That could have gone sideways fast. Historians still argue whether Han Dynasty tax inspectors were meticulous civil servants or power-drunk bureaucrats with a flair for dramatic pouch weighing. Probably both. Later, you trade a sack of rice for an armful of cloth, undyed, coarsely woven, but strong. Another portion is exchanged for salt, another for oil. You even manage to swap one small jar of polished rice for a live chicken. You call it Big Drumstick. It promptly bites you. Your cousin offers to swap it back. You consider it. You decline. Still, there's more than rice for sale here. There are tools and trinkets, pots and pans, hairpins and leeches, the medical kind, not the annoying cousin kind. One vendor peddles wind-detecting scarves that supposedly let you forecast weather. You ask how it works. He waves the scarf. If it flaps, wind is coming. You stare. He shrugs. If it doesn't flap, no wind. Genius. You find a vendor selling rice from the south. Longer grains, more fragrant, packed in bundles of woven banana leaves. He sees you eyeing it and smirks. "This rice," he says, "feeds kings." You tap your own sacks. "This rice fed the king's farmers." He nods respectfully. "Touché." You do buy a tiny pouch, though. Just to try it. Just to know. Midday, the market erupts in a flurry of gongs and shouting. A group of local performers is setting up, a storyteller, a flutist, and someone juggling sickles. You watch with half interest while chewing a rice cake dipped in date syrup. It's sticky, it's sweet, and it's lodged firmly in your molars. The storyteller catches your attention. He's spinning a tale of a farmer who taught birds to plant rice by mimicking his gestures. At first, the birds helped him. Then they unionized and demanded equal grain portions. The crowd roars. You grin. Quirky tales like this circulate all over Han China. While not historically documented, they're shared around fires, passed from tongue to tongue, a kind of oral footnote to official history. And who's to say what's true when truth is so often tangled with memory? As the sun lowers and the shadows stretch long, your family begins to pack up. The rice is lighter, the ox cart heavier. You've earned what you came for, and then some. You tie your gains tightly and begin the slow trundle home. On the road, you pass another farmer with a cart full of broken sacks, rice leaking onto the dirt. No one speaks. The man's face is clenched. He'll be lucky to save even half. You glance down at your own tightly bound bundles. Suddenly, the weight feels like treasure. Back home, you unload, store, and recount. The house is full of soft, satisfied noises. Pots clanking, fire crackling, rice simmering. Someone plays a slow tune on the bamboo flute. Dinner is plain rice and boiled greens. Nothing fancy. But the taste. Honest. Earned. Anchored. Before bed, you check on Big Drumstick. It glares at you from its crate. "You're lucky you're cute," you whisper. Outside, the moon reflects faintly on the rice paddies, silver tracing the edges of each bund. Your muscles ache, your belly is warm, and your heart is just full enough to not overflow. Tomorrow, the cycle starts again. But tonight, you rest easy, because you traded your harvest for more than just goods. You traded it for stories, glances, flavor, and memory. And maybe, just maybe, the rice you carried remembers the journey too. You're still half asleep when the drums begin. Low and steady, they ripple through the village like a heartbeat rising from the earth itself. The morning is pale and humid, the kind of day where even the breeze feels sticky. But the energy around you. Electric. Today, the village honors the grain gods. Your grandmother is already tying red silk around your wrist for luck. She shushes your complaints, spitting on her fingers to smooth your hair and muttering, "You don't walk into a sacred ceremony looking like a scarecrow." You don't argue. The gods, you're told, notice everything, especially bad manners. The altar has been set in the center of the rice paddies, a makeshift platform of wood and stone raised just high enough to escape the last flood's muddy memory. It's covered in offerings, ripe fruits, steamed buns shaped like fish, glutinous rice pyramids wrapped in fragrant leaves, and at least 3 roasted chickens with their feet still attached. Apparently, gods have no issue with presentation. You kneel beside your family, just close enough to smell the incense curling off thick bronze burners, heavy with sandalwood and dried orange peel. A priest in a dark blue robe begins chanting, waving a feather fan in a slow figure 8. You can't understand every word, some are in an older tongue, possibly a regional dialect or ritualized version of classical Chinese, but you catch the names of deities tied to water, wind, and growth. The Han Dynasty pantheon was sprawling, like a marketplace full of divine personalities. Chief among the agrarian guardians is Shinno, the divine farmer, said to have taught humans how to plant the 5 grains and invented agriculture itself. In some stories, he had a transparent stomach so he could watch how foods affected him. This same guy supposedly tasted hundreds of herbs a day to learn their medicinal value. One popular legend claims he died after sampling a toxic plant that foamed his mouth and burst his gut. But hey, at least he took notes. Historians still argue whether Shennong ever existed or was an amalgamation of early agricultural leaders mythologized into one divine farmer god. But in villages like yours, he's real enough to feed. The priest lays a bowl of the freshest rice at the front of the altar. You know it won't be eaten. It's for him. And he's not alone. There's also Ho-ji, the Lord of Millet, a semi-divine figure who supposedly sprang from his dead mother's body and helped civilize early humans through cereal cultivation. While millet may be his specialty, he's been co-opted into the rice world too, because honestly, in ancient religion, job descriptions were loose. You get a divine resume, and people start assigning you duties. Then there are local gods, spirits tied to rivers, stones, or particular fields. Your village has its own paddy spirit, said to be a young woman who drowned during a flood centuries ago. To this day, farmers leave tiny dumplings at a certain tree near the westernmost terrace. She watches over the sprouts, your uncle says, serious as a tax official. You help your cousin carry jars of jeonnyong, fermented rice pudding, to the ritual table. The priest dips a branch of plum into one jar and flicks the liquid onto the earth. A taste for the ancestors, he intones, a fragrance for the gods. You resist the urge to lick the rim. As the ceremony continues, dancers enter. Their faces are painted white with thick black brows and red mouths, stylized like opera masks. They move in slow, deliberate circles. their feet splashing gently in the shallow water of the paddies. Each step is a prayer. Each gesture, a hope. For rain, for sun, for a harvest that doesn't end in starvation. And here's the thing that gets whispered only among friends and mischievous cousins. These gods? Sometimes, you can bargain with them. You once heard about a farmer who promised to shave his head if the next harvest didn't drown. Another offered to fast every 7th day. Some promised carved wooden figures, or a new incense burner, or even their child's first haircut, kept in a red pouch under the household altar. You ask your grandmother if it works. She smirks. Not always. The gods are picky. Later that day, your family returns home to perform a more personal ritual, the household rice blessing. A small brazier is lit in the center of your home's courtyard, and each family member takes a pinch of uncooked rice to drop into the flames. For protection, your father murmurs, and plenty. The rice sizzles as it hits the embers, popping like tiny fireworks. You learn that this ritual is tied to Zhao Jun, the kitchen god. He's a bit nosy, known for reporting your household's behavior to the heavens at year's end. Which means, of course, people bribe him with rice cakes, sweet ones, so that his mouth is too sticky to talk. Yes, really. You giggle at the idea of a divine snitch with his jaw glued shut by molasses. Better than being cursed, your aunt says. He once turned an entire household's rice into worms. Is it true? No one knows. But no one wants to find out. As the evening settles in, you explore the lesser-known rice rituals. One involves painting rice water across doorframes during a child's naming day. Supposedly, it keeps bad spirits from crossing the threshold. Another, a bit spookier, involves burying a bowl of rice upside down near your front steps after someone dies, meant to guide their soul away from lingering. So they don't stay hungry, your grandmother whispers, half chant, half warning. But perhaps the most beautiful ritual is the lantern rice walk. This only happens once a year. Families fill paper lanterns with rice grains instead of candles, and children walk in a slow procession through the village at dusk. The idea. Carry your hopes for the harvest across the land. Let the spirits see your need and your gratitude. You remember your first lantern walk. Your fingers trembled around the bamboo handle. You weren't sure if the gods cared. But you walked anyway. Tonight, you're older. You join again, your lantern heavier this time, not with just rice, but memory. As the procession weaves past the paddies, the moon glints off the flooded terraces like shattered silver. Somewhere in the darkness, frogs croak and water buffalo snort, unconcerned with celestial oversight. But you feel watched. Not in a scary way, more like a benevolent gaze. The kind that says, I see you. Keep going. Keep growing. Back home, your brother has hidden leftover festival sweets under your pillow. It's a small ritual of his own. If you wake up with crumbs, he grins, you'll dream of abundance. You scoff, but leave them there, and sleep comes easy. You wake to the thud of footsteps and the clatter of wooden wheels. It's still dark, but there's a smell in the air. Dust, oxen sweat, and something vaguely sweet. The caravan is assembling. You pull on your tunic and scurry toward the road just outside the village where wide carts groan under burlap sacks filled with something worth more than silver, rice. Trade days aren't just economic events, they're performances. Today, you're not a farmer but a courier of grain, a node in a vast network that reaches far beyond your patch of earth. Your village is nestled in the floodplains of the Yangtze, but rice doesn't stay put. It travels. And so do you. The cartmaster, a broad-shouldered woman with arms like bundled rope, waves you into position. Northbound, she grunts. Jiankong, Luoyang, and if the roads hold, maybe even Chang'an. You blink. The idea that your rice, stuff you helped weed with bare hands, might end up on a nobleman's table in the imperial capital feels surreal. Like if your childhood drawings somehow ended up in an emperor's scrapbook. But that's the Han Dynasty for you. By this point in time, roughly the 1st and 2nd centuries, China is buzzing with internal commerce. You've heard the phrase 1,000 times, all under heaven. And in many ways, it's true. Roads stretch like veins, rivers flow like arteries, and the empire's pulse is rice. You begin walking alongside the ox cart, your stick tapping out a rhythm in the dirt. Behind you, the fields fade into mist. Ahead, the path opens wide. As the day brightens, so do the colors of the passing world. First, small hamlets dotting the banks of tributary rivers. Then larger market towns, where loud-voiced vendors hawk boiled eggs, fried tofu, and talismans that claim to ward off evil road spirits. One offers to sell you a lucky cricket, kept in a tiny bamboo cage. You pass. Midway through the journey, you cross a toll gate manned by soldiers. They don't ask for your name, but they do count your bags. Rice caravans pay in coin or grain, it's a kind of moving tax. The cart master grumbles but complies. She spits in the dirt after the exchange. Bandits wear armor now, she mutters. She's not wrong. Trade is dangerous. Not all the threats wear official uniforms, either. There are real bandits in the hills, and whispers of rice raiders, desperate people who steal grain not to sell, but to eat. Historians still argue whether these raiders were part of organized resistance movements or just unlucky farmers driven mad by famine. Either way, you keep your blade nearby. You sleep beside the cart that night, curled up against a sack of fragrant long-grain rice. It's strange, this particular variety smells almost floral. The cart master calls it Fragrance Emperor, a niche breed popular in richer regions. You wonder who decides what rice is good. Is it taste, texture, or just what sells in the capital? As you doze off, the campfire crackles and someone begins humming an old rice harvest song. You don't know all the words, but you recognize the melody. It's the same one your grandmother sings when she wants the spirits to bless a good soak of rain. Come morning, you've entered mountain country. Here, the paths narrow and the carts creak dangerously around tight bends. Sometimes, you help unload to lighten the load uphill. Sometimes, you just walk beside the cliff and pray. In these regions, the rice changes. You pass through terraced farms where the grains are short and dense, adapted to thinner soils and cooler air. Farmers here speak with different accents, wear wool vests, and season their rice with smoked yak butter. You try a bowl. It tastes like campfire and barnyard, but in a good way. You learn something important on this leg of the journey. Rice is not one thing. It's sticky or fluffy, red or white, long or round. It's food, yes, but also payment, dowry, medicine, and, occasionally, bribe. One traveling scholar you meet claims rice wine saved his life. I bribed a customs officer with 3 jugs of the stuff, he confesses, adjusting his crooked hat. Got me through 4 provinces and a war zone. He hands you a scroll to read, and on it are grain prices in different districts, evidence of regional economies. Some regions export, others import. The surplus moves where the stomachs are. Another merchant tells you that rice even travels west, to Bactria, India, and places so far the sun sets in different directions. You're skeptical. But then he shows you a coin stamped with script you can't read and tells you it bought rice in Alexandria. Is it true? No idea. But the thought makes your skin buzz. Not all trade is overland. Eventually, the road spills out near a canal port, where flat-bottom boats bob lazily on greenish water. These are the arteries of southern China, hundreds of miles of canals, rivers, and engineered channels designed to carry goods across impossible distances. The rice gets loaded into woven baskets, then ferried downriver, bound for the imperial granaries. You board a boat yourself, and for the first time in weeks, your legs get a rest. The water lulls you into a doze, punctuated by the splash of oars and the occasional shout from passing fishers. You float past towns with elegant names, Suzhou, Yixing, Jingling, each with its own dialect, dumpling style, and rice customs. In some, rice is tossed at weddings like Westerners do with flower petals. In others, it's molded into little sculptures of animals or historical heroes. You see a tiny rice panda on one vendor's cart and nearly cry at how perfect it is. At last, your journey ends at a granary depot outside Luoyang, one of the capitals of the Han. The building is massive, wooden beams thicker than you, stacked with rice in giant vats. Government clerks scribble on bamboo slips, calculating intake, issuing stamps, sealing deliveries. The air smells like paper, sweat, and grain. You deliver your portion, and the cart master signs a receipt in thick, brushy characters. Paid in full, it reads. Then she turns to you and says, "Don't just farm rice. Follow it. It'll show you what a country truly values." Later that night, in a cheap-in room above a noodle shop, you lie awake listening to the bubbling of a rice porridge pot downstairs. The city bustles beyond the window, but in your hands, you hold something simple, a single grain you kept from your own field. Just one. It made the whole journey with you. From waterlogged paddies to mountain passes to capital kitchens. A tiny, edible witness to empire. It's morning in Luoyang, and the city hums like a beehive that never sleeps. You're not just a visitor anymore. You've tasted the capital's dust, slept on its bamboo-matted floors, and eaten noodles that cost more than a whole week's rice allowance back home. Today, though, you're headed somewhere no grain carrier usually steps foot, the inner workings of Han government. The cart master knows a clerk who knows a scribe who owes a favor to a magistrate's cousin, and somehow, that daisy chain gets you an invite. Well, more like a tolerated presence, in the outer court precincts. You're still a mudfoot farmer, sure, but you've got clean clothes and a borrowed pass tag, and you're walking into one of the most important power centers in the Han Dynasty. Try not to trip. You slip into the Grain Bureau compound. It's not flashy, no gold statues or fire-breathing dragon gates, but the silence is thick, like a temple. A clerk in robes darker than tea leads you past bamboo slip archives and ink-stained accountants. You're ushered into a high-ceilinged room with rows of desks, and at the end, a huge map of the empire, hand-painted in tones of ink and vermilion. Your mouth goes dry. You spot your region. Tiny. Just a smudge. But there it is, your rice floodplain. A senior official, face hidden behind an elaborate silk fan, talks numbers. You don't understand all of it, but the gist is clear. This is where decisions are made. How many bushels go where? Which provinces receive grain relief during droughts? What gets taxed, who gets forgiven, and who gets quietly removed? A phrase that makes you instinctively touch the grain amulet around your neck. Rice, the official says without looking up, is politics. You thought you were done with hard truths after learning about crocodile dung sunscreen and maggot stew. But no. This is where things get prickly. In the Han Dynasty, rice isn't just a crop. It's a weapon, a bribe, a promise, a threat. Imperial granaries, called Changpingkang, store massive amounts of rice, not just to feed people during famines, but to stabilize market prices. When grain prices spike, the government releases rice to cool things down. When prices fall too low, it buys up grain to prop up the economy. The Han rulers were essentially proto-economists, rice Keynesians, if you will. Historians still argue whether these policies were designed to protect peasants or preserve elite stability. Some say the Han were the world's first welfare state. Others say it was just a rice-soaked illusion masking authoritarianism. Either way, the system worked. Most of the time. In one chamber, you glimpse stacks of wood-carved rice measurements. Asterisk asterisk dough asterisk asterisk, who, sure, used to standardize grain trades across thousands of miles. These units aren't just for show. They're the backbone of bureaucracy. You get paid in rice. Taxes are taken in rice. Even certain military ranks are rewarded with, you guessed it, rice. Outside, you pass a procession of government donkeys hauling sacks toward a storage yard. The branding on them says, Tax Harvest, for Northern Disbursement. You squint at the insignia. It's the same stamp on the receipt from your own village's caravan. The rice you helped plant is now being used to feed soldiers on the frontier. And here's the kicker, you never got to vote on it. Later, in a nearby pavilion, you strike up a conversation with a government advisor who seems to be hiding from actual work. He's reclining on a bench, sipping plum wine, and throwing rice grains to the sparrows. Want to know what makes an emperor legit? He says, smirking. Feed the people. That's it. Forget the dragons and star omens and jade seals. If they've got rice, they don't riot. He chuckles and adds, until they don't. Then they riot with farming tools. You ask if that's happened recently. Oh, once or twice. He waves a hand. Minor rebellions. The yellow turbans are getting noisy out west, but they'll burn out. Spoiler alert, they won't. The Yellow Turban Rebellion will erupt decades later and help bring down the entire dynasty. But for now, you just nod. The advisor tosses one last grain to a bird and stands up. This whole thing runs on rice. The taxes, the soldiers, the ceremonies, even the emperor's breakfast. You ask what the emperor eats, and he leans in conspiratorially. 8 treasure congee. Rice porridge with lotus seeds, chestnuts, red dates, longan, peanuts, goji berries, barley, and a splash of rice wine. Sounds excessive. Sounds delicious. You thank him and head back through the court buildings. You're not allowed into the inner palace, but you catch a glimpse of it through a decorative screen, golden eaves, silk banners, and a scent of jasmine that wafts like a rumor. You try to imagine the emperor, sitting in his jade seat, sipping imperial porridge made from rice grown by people like you. What does he think of when he eats it? Does he picture the farmers ankle-deep in paddies, hauling manure, dodging leeches? Or is it just a texture, a warmth in the belly? You'll never know. But you realize something. Back home, rice is survival. Here, it's symbolism. At dusk, you visit the public square and find a crowd gathered around a storyteller. He's animated, gesturing wildly, voice rising and falling like a zither line. His tale is about the mandate of heaven, the divine approval that grants emperors their right to rule. He says it's visible in signs, good harvests, peace, prosperity. A hush falls as he concludes, but if the rice fails, the heavens withdraw their favor. And the throne falls. The crowd claps. You shiver. The weight of those words settles like husks on your shoulders. The next morning, you visit a granary complex just outside the capital. This one is for military provisioning. Rows of stacked barrels, stamped with the imperial seal, ready for deployment. You watch laborers seal the barrels with lacquer, then load them onto barge after barge. Each one a floating embassy of Han dominance. A scribe tells you that, during drought years, rice is shipped in reverse, from the capital to the provinces. Even the emperor fears famine, he says. It topples thrones faster than swords. Another tidbit you overhear, some granary managers skim off the top. Corruption is an open secret. The punishment, public flogging or exile. Or, in one grisly case, being force-fed rotten rice until death. Historians still argue whether this last part is true or just bureaucratic folklore. By evening, you're walking the city's edge, past temples where priests chant for good harvests. You pause at a wall mural depicting Nuwa, the goddess who patched the sky. In the mural, she's scattering rice like stars across the earth. You feel small, but also part of something. On your last night in Luoyang, you buy a bowl of street congee and sit beneath a lantern. You watch other faces, merchants, soldiers, beggars, scribes, all hunched over their bowls, slurping in rhythm. You wonder how many of them think about where this rice came from. The paddies, the sweat, the leeches, the fertilizer pits. You doubt they do, but you do, and you always will. You lie flat on your back now, the mat beneath you thin but familiar, the thatched roof above you swaying gently in rhythm with the night breeze. But even with the scent of fermented fish wafting in from the next room and the distant grumble of bullfrogs in the dikes, your mind hasn't slowed down yet. Not tonight. Because today you didn't just feed the village. You built its future. You're still ankle-deep in sticky soil, your knees red from the careful push and plant of young rice shoots. And let's be honest, your back may never forgive you. But the seedling transplanting ritual is one of the most precise and communal events on the agricultural calendar, and now, you're right in the thick of it. Picture this. The nurseries you nurtured weeks ago are bursting with spindly green stalks just begging to be relocated. The lowland paddies, finally flooded to that sweet spot between mud soup and actual pond, gleam under the sun like silver ink. With careful deliberation and a rhythm only muscle memory can supply, you and a line of fellow farmers bend and straighten like a single living creature, planting one seedling at a time in perfect rows. Why the rows? Because water's a diva, and without order, she gets cranky. Even spacing allows for optimal drainage, sun exposure, and weed control. And besides, it just looks satisfying. But of course, you're not alone. Auntie Lynn is 3 spots over, humming off-key. Old Man Bao has developed a very passionate opinion about your foot placement. And a curious egret watches nearby, completely unbothered by your mud-slinging bickering. It's less serene pastoral scene, and more mud wrestling sitcom, really. In fact, that egret has probably seen some things. Because transplanting is not just tiring, it's tactical. Some believe the seedlings should be angled just so, to catch the chi of the sunrise. Others say deeper roots make stronger stalks. But plant too deep, and your crop is toast. Or soup. Depends on the day. Historians still argue whether early Han transplanting relied on lunar cycles or local priest recommendations, and honestly, you're just hoping not to accidentally step on a frog. Still, the science here is no joke. The seedling to patty time gap matters. Wait too long, and the roots spiral into themselves, confused and angry. Transplant too soon, and the young shoots collapse from shock. So you're operating within that magical, maybe 4-day window. No pressure. And the weather has to cooperate. Nothing derails a transplant schedule like an unseasonal monsoon or a blistering drought. You eye the sky more often than you blink, decoding clouds the way modern folks scroll weather apps. Is that a rain dragon belly? Or just a sleepy cumulus passing by? Good luck betting your annual yield on that. But the risks are worth it. This method, nursery starts followed by flooded field planting, means higher germination, denser planting, and better weed control. Because oh yes, weeds are the true villains of this story. Ever tried pulling invasive sedge while your face is basically kissing the mud? You haven't lived. And right after transplanting comes the art of water control. You're no longer just a farmer, you're a full-time irrigation technician, diplomat, and sometimes, amateur weather priest. Too much water, and your roots drown. Too little, and they bake. So you trudge to the sluice gates at dawn, adjusting wooden planks with the ceremony of a royal decree. The patties aren't just hydrated, they're pampered. Which is why, during these weeks, no one sleeps well. You lie there, half dreaming of levees bursting or rogue ducks staging coups. Even your dreams are damp. Let's not forget the pests. Ah yes, the rice field menagerie. Golden apple snails, mischievous sparrows, even deer if you're close to the foothills. But your least favorite? Leaf hoppers. Those sap-sucking acrobats can transmit rice tungro disease faster than you can shout, hey. Farmers have been known to set scarecrows dressed like bureaucrats. Apparently, the sparrows prefer not to be audited. Still, this is the heart of your year. If you bungle this stage, everything else, harvest, taxes, offerings, is off-kilter. So despite the mud, the mosquitoes, and the back pain that could knock out a water buffalo, you keep going. Planting each shoot with that same quiet hope. May this stalk rise, thrive, and feed mouths through winter. And once the rows are filled and the sun finally dips behind the bamboo grove, there's a stillness. A hush. Not silence exactly, just the sound of work well done. The fields look like a mirror shattered by orderly lines, reflecting a sky full of promise. You stretch, groaning, and splash water on your face from a communal basin. The droplets are cold, glorious, and muddy, exactly how success tastes tonight. You smile at Auntie Lynn, who just belched loud enough to scare the egret. And you realize, maybe you will survive this after all. Probably. Later that month, the village buzzes in low, crackling rhythms. Cicadas drone, water wheels churn with sleepy groans, and somewhere, a pot of millet porridge burbles over an open flame. The fields are green now, thicker and bolder, and so is the task list. Because now comes mid-season maintenance, the least glamorous, most vital part of rice farming. You wake before sunrise, slipping out of bed and into sandals still damp from yesterday's stroll through the paddy. There's a smell in the air, wet earth, rotting straw, and the faint, unmistakable tang of ammonia. It's fertilizer day. Not the synthetic granules modern folks are used to. Oh no. You're working with fermented compost slurry, cow dung, night soil, yes, that's human poop, rotten vegetables, and the occasional fish head for good measure. You lug a sloshing bucket of this ambrosia toward the far paddies, holding your breath and your dignity. Barely. Now, there's a real debate about this. Historians still argue whether early Han farmers always used night soil or whether that became common later. But there's evidence that nutrient cycling, getting your waste back into the soil, wasn't just practical, it was a whole eco-philosophy. Nothing wasted. Everything returned. And so you splash your lovingly rotted soup along the rows, knowing it'll coax the rice to thicken, to bolden, to brace itself for the coming months. Your nose may never recover, but your yield might just double. Then comes weeding. Sweet celestial dragons, the weeding. Bent over, toes gripping slick mud, you pluck sedge, duckweed, and sneaky little grasses that weren't there yesterday but are now staging a full rebellion. It's never ending. Pull one, 3 sprout. It's whack-a-weed, Han edition. You pause to stretch and catch a glimpse of something odd. 2 frogs locked in what appears to be a martial arts duel on a lily pad. You blink. They blink. You get back to work. Farming, after all, waits for no amphibian circus. Mid-season is also the time for pest management. You've strung up reflective bits of bronze to flash in the sunlight and scare birds. You've tied bells to bamboo stakes. And somewhere, a teenage cousin is giggling while painting angry faces on gourds. It's all part of the ritual. If you're lucky, or cursed, you'll be chosen for smoke duty. This means carrying smoldering bundles of straw across the fields, letting the smoke drift to confuse insects. Bonus, you now smell like a very flammable ghost. Meanwhile, the rice keeps growing. Taller. Greener. Some stalks even develop a faint purpling at the tips, like nature's way of winking at you. You start to notice patterns. One paddy always grows faster than its neighbors. Historians still argue whether it's because of soil type, water retention, or just that one time someone buried a lucky pig's tooth there. Mid-season is when everyone grows quiet, tired, hopeful, a bit afraid. Because this is the gamble stage. You've done your part. Now, nature holds the dice. A flood, a drought, or a rogue locust swarm could end it all. But on most days, you just focus on one more weed, one more scoop, one more offering to the paddy gods. And when evening rolls in, you sit beside the canal, feet dangling, hands raw. A heron stalks the water's edge. A cousin plays the flute badly. And you close your eyes, knowing that even if no one sings songs about mid-season, it's where your rice learned to be strong. It's harvest season now. The air is sharper, the sunlight filtered through thinner clouds, and your shadow stretches long and golden over the ripened fields. You breathe it in, this heavy, grassy perfume of nearly dried rice husks and crushed stalks, and you know it's time. You reach for your sickle, worn from years of use and wrapped with a red ribbon for luck. Rituals matter today. You're not just harvesting food, you're closing a sacred circle. Rice grains bend under their own weight, nodding as if bowing in gratitude. You step into the paddy, sickle in hand, and begin the rhythmic swipe. Snip, gather, bundle. Swipe, gather, bundle. Your hands work fast but gentle. Too hard, and the grains scatter. Too soft, and the stalk slips away. The whole village moves like a slow storm across the fields. There's laughter, grunts, the occasional shouted flirtation. One teenager shows off with a double-handed swing and promptly slips face-first into the mud. You're still giggling about it 2 bundles later. Once cut, the rice is bundled into sheaves and stood upright to dry in the sun. These golden teepees dot the fields, catching wind and gossip alike. Birds swoop overhead, daring you to guard your crop. You throw a sandal. They mock you anyway. Threshing comes next. You beat the sheaves against wooden frames or stomp them underfoot to free the grains. Chaff flies like golden snow. You sneeze twice and decide, philosophically, that rice owes you a bath and a raise. The grains are then winnowed, poured from basket to basket so wind can separate husk from treasure. Kids try to help but mostly chase the husks like confetti. You let them. Celebration is part of survival. By the end of the week, your body hums with exhaustion. Every muscle aches. But your storeroom begins to fill, little by little. You offer thanks at the altar, light incense, and whisper a quiet promise to the ancestors. We made it. You've made it through the harvest, and now the rhythm of life downshifts, just a little. Not to idleness, of course. The land may sleep, but you never quite do. This is the time of sorting, of drying, of accounting. You squat near large bamboo mats where grains of rice spread out like pale gold coins under the sun. Your job. Rake them gently, evenly, turn them just enough so they don't mold. Too much sun, and they crack. Too little, and they rot. Even in this, especially in this, there is an art. Around you, others work the same mats, occasionally pausing to chat, joke, or scold someone for walking too close and kicking up dust. The village accountant, scrolls in hand, strolls through the aisles like a rooster among hens, calculating yields and taking notes with the same seriousness as a magistrate preparing for a trial. You try not to roll your eyes too hard when he asks you, again, if your sheaf count seems optimistically rounded. The rice must be stored properly. Moisture, rats, insects, all enemies now. The granary is swept clean, sealed tight, sometimes even blessed. You stack the sacks carefully. Too high, and they tumble. Too low, and the mice laugh. You set traps, light incense, post watch. Even in sleep, the harvest must be defended. But it's not all tension and counting. With the pressure of planting, tending, and reaping finally behind you, the village begins to stretch. Festivals bloom. You're invited to a harvest feast, one of many. The long table is lined with roasted duck, taro root, sticky rice steamed in leaves, and soups that somehow taste like stories passed from great-grandparents. You sit next to the flute-playing cousin again, and this time he's actually in tune. Mostly. Someone sings an old field ballad, half a joke, half a prayer. Auntie Lynn jumps in with a raunchier verse and is promptly pelted with sweet rice cakes. Laughter ripples through the room like warm broth. Later, lanterns go up. Red ones. Gold ones. Shapes of tigers, fish, dragons. Children carry them between paddies, watching their own reflections dance in the irrigation water like spirits. One night, lying on your back again beneath that same thatched roof, you catch sight of the moon, perfect and swollen, like a rice dumpling in the sky. You know what that means. Mid-autumn is near. You prepare mooncakes, not the delicate modern ones, but rustic, heavy pastries with fillings like black sesame, lotus seed, or candied chestnut. You hand one to your younger sibling, who bites into it, makes a face, and says, "Next time, less salt, more sweet." You ruffle their hair and make a mental note. Baking is not your legacy. Mid-autumn is also a time of poems. Not just the ones written on scrolls, but those spoken aloud, shared across rice wine, or etched into the dirt with a stick. You find yourself reciting one that starts off serious but devolves into a pun about ducks and taxes. It earns groans, and then a round of applause. There's a strange quiet that follows these days. You're not idle, but you're no longer chasing. It's a time of repairs, patching roofs, fixing tools, retying that red ribbon on your sickle handle. You walk through the fields now more like a guardian than a worker. The soil has dried. The water channels are slower. But your footsteps remain steady. You find yourself carving a wooden token for good luck next season. A frog, maybe, in honor of those martial artist amphibians. Or a rice stalk. Or maybe just a shape that feels right in your palm when held. It's hard to explain to someone outside this world how deep this life gets under your skin. How every scratch, every bite, every drop of sweat leaves behind a map of memory. So tonight, as the crickets sing and the last lanterns sway gently in the window, you close your eyes and let yourself feel something rare, stillness. For once, there's nothing to race toward. The season has ended. And you lived it fully. Tomorrow, Maybe you'll plan next season's crop. Maybe you won't. But tonight, the rice is in the granary, your hands are clean, and your heart, though quiet, is full. You sleep deeply, like a field finally allowed to rest. The new year whispers in on a misty breath. The fields lie quiet, slick with dew, a hush spreading across the paddies like a blanket tucking the land in. You wake not to urgency, but to the kind of morning that takes its time arriving. Silver light sliding lazily across your ceiling beams. There's a hush in the village, too. Even the chickens seem to crow with restraint. It's winter, but not the icy kind that freezes fingers. This is southern China. Softer, wetter, a place where the cold creeps in through damp walls and lingers in your bones. You wrap yourself in layers, slurp a steaming bowl of congee by the hearth, and stretch like a cat in the low warmth. For now, the fields demand nothing. But the future waits. This is when reflection turns into intention. You sharpen tools slowly, not out of necessity, but ceremony. The handle of your sickle, worn smooth from seasons past, feels familiar as your own hand. There's a crack in the hoe's neck. You bind it with rattan and resin, humming a tune only your ancestors would recognize. And then you begin to plan. Not on parchment or with diagrams, your knowledge doesn't need ink. It lives in your spine, your palms, your ears that know the pitch of good water. But still, you walk the dikes and murmur your questions aloud. What if you stagger the plantings to avoid monsoon flood timing? Should you swap out part of the southern plot for a glutinous variety? Is that weed from last year still dormant in the soil, biding its time like a petty god waiting to stir trouble again? There are rumors of new tools coming in from the western regions. Someone's cousin in Woyong swears by an iron double-toothed rake that has weeding time. You squint skeptically. Every year there's a new, miracle implement. But hey, maybe this one's not all snake oil. At night, the elders gather to tell stories. Not just any stories, origin tales, myths woven tight into rice's golden braid. One insists rice was a divine gift, spilled from the sleeves of a star maiden. Another claims it grew from the belly of a drowned god. You sip rice wine, nod, and don't argue. Whether from stars or guts, it fills your belly just the same. You overhear a quiet conversation. Someone's son might leave for the city, drawn by silk wages and dreams of writing for the court. It stirs something odd in you. Pride, maybe? Or the subtle ache of knowing things change. A little girl, barefoot and shrieking with glee, runs past holding a frog. You lock eyes with the creature. It looks like it's questioning your entire life's purpose. You nod solemnly. It blinks, unimpressed. By mid-season, a trader arrives bearing gifts from faraway lands. Cinnamon, cloth, a strange dried fruit no one can name. You trade 3 bundles of rice straw for a carved comb. It's cheap, but when you give it to your sibling, they beam like you've handed them a crown. Back in the paddies, the soil is drying. You press your heel into the earth. Still a few weeks until it's ready. Time enough to mend the levees, deepen the inlet trench, and argue with the water diviner who swears you've angered the river spirit with last year's fence repair. Historians still argue whether farmers in the Han actually followed formal lunar agricultural calendars or just trusted oral tradition and the stars. You glance at a frog's skin, sniff the air, feel the tug in your shoulder. That's your calendar. That's always been enough. The village prepares quietly. Seeds are soaked. Lines are drawn. The cycle breathes in again. You kneel at the edge of the nearest flooded paddy, the water cool and ready, and you smile, not because it's easy, but because you know it by heart. You're not just surviving the land. You are part of its memory. And as you push the first seedling into the soft mud once more, it hits you. You've done this before. You'll do this again. And it will matter every single time. And now, your body unwinds. Your breath slows. The water still ripples quietly in the ditches of memory, and the fields stretch out, soft, endless, patient. You've walked the cycle. From seed to feast. From firelit lullabies to the first wet step into the new season. Can you still feel the sticky heat of the sun on your neck? The sting of chaff between your fingers? Or maybe it's the low laughter of neighbors in the distance, drifting in like mist from another time. The land sleeps now, just like you will. Let your mind cradle the rhythms you followed, ones older than emperors, deeper than scrolls. The press of your foot on that muddy embankment. The silence between insect chirps. That feeling of watching your crop rise, not just from the earth, but from your own quiet labor. Even now, beneath the stillness, the seeds you planted are dreaming. You've worked the land without rushing. You've listened without judgment. You've laid down each moment like a grain in the granary. Safe, full, enough. And whatever comes next, new seasons, new tools, new paths, you'll meet them the way you always have. With muddy hands. With a crooked grin. With a frog perched on your shoulder, maybe. So go ahead. Sink into that quiet. Let the paddy mist fold around you like a lullaby. The field is still. The lanterns are out. And you are home.